Number 1. Eduardo Valdivia. Eduardo Valdivia was a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and a resident of Gaithersburg, Maryland. By 2024, he had served over a decade with the FBI and simultaneously operated a tattoo studio known as DC Fine Line Tattoos, located on Washingtonian Boulevard. He was also connected to a second studio on Travilla Road in Potomac. Despite his professional affiliation with the FBI, Valdivia used several aliases including Lalo Brown, L. Boogie, and Dr. Tiffany Kim to carry out a series of sexual assaults targeting young women between 2022 and 2024. The first report against Valdivia was filed in October 2024. A woman in her early 22nd informed police that she had been sexually assaulted by a man she knew as Lalo Brown inside the Gaithersburg tattoo shop. The victim stated that she initially met Valdivia through Instagram, where he offered a free tattoo in exchange for modeling his artwork. After receiving a tattoo, she was invited back to the shop for a photo shoot and a supposed modeling contract. During this session, Valdivia assaulted her. According to police, he later coerced her into a second meeting by threatening her with legal consequences over the contract, leading to a second assault at a nearby hotel. In November 2024, a second woman stepped forward with an almost identical account. She too had received a free tattoo under the promise of modeling work. Like the first victim, she was invited back to participate in a photo shoot and presented with a contract. During that visit, Valdivia also assaulted her. Investigators later discovered that both victims had been communicating with Valdivia under his female alias, Dr. Tiffany Kim, who was introduced as a psychologist and CEO of a prestigious modeling agency. Soon after news of the arrest became public, a third victim contacted police. She reported that in October 2022, at the age of 18, she was also assaulted by Valdivia at his Potomac tattoo studio. She had been lured in with similar promises of free services and modeling opportunities. All three women positively identified Valdivia. Montgomery County Police expressed concern that additional victims may exist but have not come forward due to fear, signed contracts, or confusion about the legitimacy of Valdivia's operations. Police emphasized that consent cannot be overridden by a contract and encouraged other potential victims to report their experiences. Assistant Chief of the Montgomery County Police Department stated that Valdivia used his position and personas to create a false sense of security using contracts and modeling offers to manipulate his victims. Valdivia was arrested in November 2024 and initially held without bond at the Montgomery County Detention Center. The FBI suspended him pending the outcome of the investigation and publicly stated that it was cooperating fully with local law enforcement. In its brief statement, the FBI emphasized that it treats all allegations of criminal misconduct with utmost seriousness and declined to provide further comment due to the ongoing legal process. This case was not Valdivia's first encounter with the criminal justice system. In December 2020, while off duty, he shot and injured a man on a metro train in Bethesda, Maryland. The victim sustained serious internal injuries and required multiple surgeries. He was charged with attempted second-degree murder and related offenses but was acquitted in late 2022 after claiming self-defense. Surveillance footage showed that a verbal exchange had escalated when the other man had asked him for money. Valdivia had issued verbal warnings before firing at close range. A jury ultimately found him not guilty. Following the 2024 arrest for sexual assault, Valdivia was formally charged with 6 counts of second-degree assault, 2 counts of fourth-degree abuse offense, and 8 counts of second-degree assault. His attorney indicated that the defense would challenge the accusations describing the encounters as consensual and questioning the prosecution's narrative. On the 14th of July, 2025, Valdivia was found guilty on all charges related to the 3 women. The court determined that he used deception, coercion, and threats to assault the victims. They imposed a sentence of 106 years in state prison, well below the maximum of 122 years, but effectively a life sentence. He was immediately discharged from the FBI with loss of all federal benefits, and he was transferred to the North Branch Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland, a high-security facility housing violent offenders. As of March 2025, Eduardo Valdivia has served 5 months of his 106-year sentence at North Branch Correctional Institution. He was 41 at the time of the crimes and will be 147 years old by the time he completes the full sentence, with no parole eligibility currently scheduled. Number 2. William Roy Stone Jr. In November 2015, just 1 month after retiring from the FBI's Dallas field office, 62-year-old William Roy Stone Jr. began orchestrating a fraudulent scheme against a Texas woman identified in court documents as CT. Over the next 4 years, Stone exploited CT by convincing her she was under secret probation for drug crimes in Austin. He used threats, false identities, and fabricated legal authority to coerce her into giving him more than $800,000. According to federal prosecutors, Stone told the victim that she had been placed under the supervision of a federal judge known as Judge Anderson, and that Stone had been appointed to act as her probation mentor and supervisor. There is no record of such a judge. Stone falsely claimed that CT's probation was classified, and that disclosing it to anyone would violate the terms and potentially result in her imprisonment or the loss of custody of her children. He demanded that she report all her personal activities and financial information to him. He instructed her to pay for his travel, housing, and vehicles as part of the supposed probation monitoring arrangement. Over time, Stone fabricated legal obligations such as restitution payments to fictitious companies and deposited the money directly into his own bank accounts. To maintain control over CT and reinforce the illusion, he used several deceptive tactics. He placed spoofed phone calls posing as a federal judge and involved other individuals pretending to be DEA officials. He told CT that he had access to her phone communications and claimed he was regularly speaking with law enforcement and psychiatrists about her case. These tactics created a persistent fear in the victim, who believed she had no choice but to comply. He also isolated CT by telling her that her family was trying to steal her inheritance from her grandmother and that she should distance herself from them. At one point, he proposed marriage and told her that doing so might lead to her probation being dismissed. Prosecutors stated that CT, under the belief that she was facing legal consequences and that Stone was a legitimate authority figure, handed over hundreds of thousands of dollars. Stone used this money to buy a home in Colleyville, Texas, a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, a Mercedes CLS sedan, and paid for remodeling through a kitchen and bath design center. Authorities became aware of the scheme through financial tracking and inconsistencies in Stone's claims. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas, in coordination with the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General, conducted an investigation and confirmed that CT was never under any federal probation or supervision. They found no record of Judge Anderson or any legal action against CT. Stone was indicted by a federal grand jury on multiple charges, including 7 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count of impersonating a federal officer, 1 count of engaging in monetary transactions with criminally derived property, and 1 count of making false statements to law enforcement. He was arrested and later released under court-imposed conditions pending trial. During court proceedings, prosecutors argued that Stone manipulated and threatened CT for years, exploiting her trust in federal authority and law enforcement. They presented evidence of financial transfers, false communications, and the forged persona of a federal officer. They also sought forfeiture of the assets Stone obtained through fraud, including the house and vehicles. Stone pleaded not guilty to all charges. His attorney said in a public statement that Stone denies each allegation and intends to clear his name in court. He argued that the case was based on a misunderstanding and that there is more to the story than what prosecutors presented. On the 6th of February, 2024, he was sentenced to 87 months in federal prison, which is equivalent to 7 years and 3 months, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Number 3. Christopher Michael Bauer. Christopher Michael Bauer, a 41-year-old former FBI agent and Alabama state trooper, was arrested on the 27th of April, 2021, in Montgomery, Alabama, and charged with the sexual abuse of an 11-year-old girl. At the time of his arrest, Bauer was employed by the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency as a state trooper. Before this role, he had served as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, primarily in the New Orleans field office. Bauer joined the FBI in 2009, after previously serving in the United States Air Force and as a police officer in Montgomery. His time in the FBI ended in late 2018 after multiple allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced. Among them was an accusation from a female co-worker who claimed Bauer assaulted her at knife point. As a result, Bauer was suspended without pay, stripped of his security clearance, and ultimately forced to leave the agency. Internal investigators concluded he had violated several FBI policies, including having sexual encounters in government vehicles. Despite these findings, Bauer applied for a trooper position in Alabama in 2019. He falsely claimed he was still employed by the FBI and had not been terminated. As part of his application, he submitted a letter purportedly from the FBI, which described him as having 10 years of creditable service and being eligible for rehire. The Alabama Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission accepted the letter, and Bauer was hired as a trooper. The FBI later confirmed that the letter was not legitimate and denied any involvement in its creation. In 2021, Bauer was accused of repeatedly assaulting an 11-year-old girl over a period of time. According to court testimony, the abuse began years earlier and continued until the girl disclosed it to a friend. The friend informed her parent, who then notified school authorities. The school contacted the Montgomery Police Department, prompting an immediate investigation. Bauer was arrested the same day and charged with first-degree sodomy and sexual abuse of a child under 12. He was held at the Montgomery County Detention Center, with bail initially set at $105,000, later increased to $210,000. Following his arrest, Bauer resigned from his position with the agency, citing personal reasons. The state agency has not publicly explained how it failed to identify his prior misconduct with the FBI during the hiring process. The FBI declined to comment on the circumstances surrounding the forged letter. Federal authorities opened a separate investigation into the forgery, but criminal charges for that matter were deferred while the state case progressed. Bauer's trial took place in Montgomery County in June 2023. The victim, now a teenager, testified in court and recounted the abuse. Her testimony was corroborated by a recorded interview with a child abuse investigator. The defense claimed the child fabricated the story and maintained Bauer's innocence. Bauer testified in his own defense, denying his actions. He told the court that a mere accusation had cost him everything and claimed that juries don't always get it right. His defense team also presented mitigating evidence, noting that Bauer had experienced a traumatic childhood in foster care and orphanages and had been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. On the 14th of June, 2023, a jury found Bauer guilty of first-degree sodomy and abuse of a child under 12. Prosecutors sought the maximum penalty. During sentencing on the 1st of August, 2023, Montgomery Circuit Judge imposed a life sentence. The judge stated on record that he believed every word of the victim's testimony. The victim's mother addressed the court and described Bauer as someone who used his badge to disguise himself as a good person. District Attorney Darrell Bailey referred to Bauer as a sexual predator and said he should be permanently removed from society. At sentencing, Bauer showed no outward emotion. In his final statement to the court, he reiterated his claim of innocence and stated, "It seems no matter what I say, no one wants to believe I'm innocent." Meanwhile, Louisiana State Police confirmed they had active warrants for Bauer, related to similar allegations from his time in the FBI's New Orleans field office. Authorities in Street Tammany and Jefferson parishes intend to extradite him once Alabama proceedings are fully resolved. As of March 2025, Christopher Michael Bauer remains incarcerated at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. He has served approximately 1 year and 7 months of his life sentence. Number 4. Thomas Michael Martens. 65-year-old Thomas Michael Martens, who was a retired FBI agent, and his 3-year-old daughter, Molly Ann Martens, were involved in the murder of Molly's husband, Jason Corbett. on the 2nd of August, 2015. The incident took place in the bedroom of the couple's home on Panther Creek Court in Davidson County, North Carolina, where Jason lived with Molly and his 2 children from a previous marriage. Jason Corbett was originally from Limerick, Ireland, and had moved to the United States with Molly after they married in 2011. Molly Martens had initially entered the Corbett household as an au pair following the death of Jason's first wife, Margaret Fitzpatrick Corbett, in 2006. Over time, she and Jason developed a romantic relationship and eventually married. Molly never legally adopted Jason's children, Jack and Sarah, reportedly because Jason declined to allow it. Their relationship later became strained and custody disputes emerged, which would become central to the context of the incident. On the morning of the 2nd of August, 2015, at approximately 3 a.m., the Davidson County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call. The caller, Thomas Martens, stated that he had struck his son-in-law with a baseball bat following a domestic altercation. Responding officers arrived at the scene to find Jason Corbett with multiple blunt force injuries to the head. His skull had been crushed. Authorities later confirmed that at least 12 severe blows had been delivered. The murder weapons were identified as a baseball bat and a concrete paving stone. Thomas and Molly Martens claimed self-defense. They alleged that Jason had been choking Molly during a domestic dispute and that Thomas intervened to protect his daughter. Despite their claims, Davidson County prosecutors argued that the attack was intentional and premeditated. Following an extensive investigation, both Thomas and Molly Martens were charged with second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. Their trial began in 2017. During proceedings, the prosecution presented forensic evidence and testimony from expert witnesses, including blood spatter analyst Dr. Stuart James. Testimony indicated the brutal nature of the assault. The defense challenged this evidence and emphasized the claim of self-defense, highlighting a history of alleged abuse by Jason Corbett, though no prior reports had been filed. Statements from Jason's children were not admitted into evidence, a point later contested during the appeal process. On the 9th of August, 2017, after a 3-week trial, both Thomas and Molly Martens were convicted of second-degree murder. Judge David Lee sentenced each of them to a prison term of 20 to 25 years. During sentencing, the judge noted the severity of the crime and rejected the self-defense argument. Neither Thomas nor Molly expressed remorse at the hearing. They were immediately remanded to the custody of the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction. Thomas Martens was officially retired from government service at the time of the crime. Thomas Martens was incarcerated at the Caldwell Correctional Center, while Molly Martens served her sentence at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. Over the following years, the defense pursued several appeals. In February 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned their convictions, ruling that the trial court erred in excluding testimony from Jason's children, which could have supported the defense's version of events. The state appealed this decision, but in March 2021, the North Carolina Supreme Court declined to reinstate the convictions and ordered a retrial. In November 2023, ahead of the new trial, both defendants entered into a plea agreement. Thomas and Molly Martens each pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, and their sentences were revised. Given the time they had already served and the nature of the agreement, they were resentenced to a term that matched time already served and were granted release. Throughout their incarceration, both maintained their innocence concerning any malicious intent. Thomas Martens stated through legal counsel that his actions were driven solely by a perceived need to protect his daughter. Molly Martens did not give a formal statement upon release, but had previously posted on social media expressing frustration with the legal process and insisting that her actions were misunderstood. Jason Corbett's children were eventually returned to his sister Tracy Corbett Lynch in Ireland after a separate custody dispute in which Molly Martens' claim to parental rights was rejected. As of March 2025, Thomas Michael Martens and Molly Ann Martens have each served approximately 6 years in custody. Molly Martens, now 41, lives in North Carolina. Both remain under supervised release conditions stemming from their plea agreement. Number 5. John Connolly. In 1982, former FBI agent John Joseph Connolly Jr., then 41 years old, was implicated in the events that led to the murder of 5-year-old businessman John Callahan in Miami, Florida. Connolly, who had retired from the FBI in 1990, was not charged until 2005, more than 2 decades after the crime. His involvement stemmed from a corrupt relationship with James Whitey Bulger, the notorious leader of Boston's Winter Hill Gang, and Bulger's associate Stephen the Rifleman Flemmi. Connolly had been assigned to handle Bulger as a top-tier informant during his time with the FBI. According to trial testimony, Connolly regularly supplied Bulger and Flemmi with confidential FBI intelligence, including information about potential witnesses, investigations, and indictments. In return, prosecutors said Connolly received cash payments and other benefits. Bulger and Flemmi used the information to protect their criminal enterprise and eliminate threats, including individuals who might implicate them in other crimes. In 1981, Roger Wheeler, the owner of the World Jai Alai Corporation, was murdered in Tulsa, Oklahoma. John Callahan, then president of World Jai Alai and known to have connections with Bulger's organization, was suspected of knowing details about that murder. Prosecutors alleged that Connolly warned Bulger and Flemmi that Callahan was about to cooperate with authorities and could potentially link the gang to Wheeler's death. Shortly after this tip-off, Callahan was lured to Miami and murdered by hitman John Martirano, who was another Winter Hill Gang associate. Callahan's body was found in the trunk of a Cadillac at the Miami International Airport. The motive, according to testimony, was to silence him before he could implicate Bulger, Flemmi, and others. Connolly was not present at the murder scene and he was in Massachusetts at the time. However, in 2005, he was indicted on state murder and conspiracy charges in Florida based on evidence that he had knowingly facilitated the murder by leaking information to Bulger and Flemmi. During Connolly's 2008 trial in Miami, key witnesses included Flemmi, Martirano, and Kevin Weeks, all former associates of Bulger. They testified that Connolly had been paid approximately $235,000 in bribes and consistently protected the gang's interests. Further evidence presented at trial included financial records showing Connolly's lifestyle and purchases inconsistent with his FBI salary, including multiple properties and a luxury boat. An IRS agent testified to this financial discrepancy. Connolly's former FBI superior John Morris also testified against him, admitting he too had accepted bribes and collaborated in passing information to the gang. The defense countered with testimony from a former U.S. attorney and district judge who stated that Connolly had played a major role in weakening the New England Mafia using informants. Connolly himself denied all allegations, stating that he never sold his badge and he never took anybody's money. On the 6th of November, 2008, a jury convicted Connolly of second-degree murder. The prosecution argued that while Connolly didn't commit the murder directly, his actions led to it. On the 15th of January, 2009, Florida judge sentenced Connolly to 40 years in prison. The judge stated that Connolly crossed over to the dark side and abused the trust and authority of his badge. The sentence was set to run consecutively with Connolly's earlier 10-year federal sentence from a 2002 racketeering conviction for warning Bulger about a pending indictment in 1995, allowing him to flee. Connolly served his federal sentence at FCI Bootner Low in North Carolina and was transferred to a Florida state prison in 2011. In 2014, the Florida 3rd District Court of Appeal overturned the murder conviction, citing statute of limitations issues and the fact that Connolly had not personally committed the murder or carried a weapon. However, in 2015, the full court reinstated the conviction in a 6-4 vote, concluding that under Florida law, Connolly could still be held responsible as a principal to the crime. By 2021, Connolly's health had deteriorated. He had been diagnosed with melanoma and diabetes, and was reportedly in critical condition. The Florida Commission on Offender Review granted him medical parole, allowing him to return to Massachusetts. The family of John Callahan did not object to the release, with Callahan's son stating that his family should have him before he dies. As of March 2025, John Connolly is 84 years old and remains under parole supervision until 2047. He served approximately 17 years in prison between his federal and state sentences before his release on medical grounds. Despite his convictions, Connolly continues to receive his federal pension due to the legal stipulation that pensions are only revoked for convictions involving treason or espionage. Number 6. Robert Hanssen. Robert Philip Hansen, who was a former FBI agent aged 56 years old at the time of his arrest, was apprehended on the 18th of February, 2001, at Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia, while making a dead drop of classified information intended for Russian intelligence. He was confronted and arrested by fellow FBI agents after placing a package beneath a wooden footbridge, having signaled his Russian handlers with a strip of white tape on a nearby park sign. Hansen had joined the FBI in 1976 and served in various divisions over his 25-year career, including counterintelligence. Before his arrest, he held a respected position at FBI headquarters and had access to some of the agency's most sensitive secrets. He lived a seemingly ordinary life in suburban Virginia with his wife Bonnie and their 6 children. A devout Catholic affiliated with Opus Dei, Hansen was known for his conservative values and outward devotion to faith and family. However, beneath the surface, he led a double life as a long-term mole for Soviet and Russian intelligence. Hansen began spying in 1979, 3 years after joining the FBI, and reinitiated espionage in 1985 after a brief hiatus. Motivated by a complex mixture of financial insecurity, professional dissatisfaction, and a belief in his intellectual superiority, he provided Soviet and Russian handlers with thousands of pages of highly classified documents. These included details about American nuclear strategies, surveillance methods, double agents, and intelligence operations. His information directly led to the exposure and execution of at least 2 Russian assets working with the United States. To protect his identity, Hansen used the alias Ramon Garcia and never met his handlers in person. Instead, he used encrypted communication and conducted dead drops in suburban parks. Over the years, he received more than $1.4 million in cash, diamonds, and foreign bank deposits in exchange for his services. Despite this, his outward lifestyle remained modest, and many of his colleagues described him as introverted and unremarkable. Suspicions about his loyalty arose within the FBI, particularly after the arrest of CIA mole Aldrich Ames in 1994 failed to account for other compromised operations. The FBI and CIA formed a joint mole hunting team, which eventually traced the leaks to Hansen. A Russian file, obtained through a multi-million-dollar payment, provided evidence, including a fingerprint and an audio recording, that identified him. To confirm their suspicions, the FBI reassigned Hansen to a new position at headquarters in 2000, where he was supervised by Eric O'Neill, a young agent secretly tasked with monitoring him. O'Neill successfully copied data from Hansen's Palm Pilot, revealing the location and time of his next dead drop. This led directly to Hansen's arrest in February 2001. Following his arrest, Hansen reportedly stated to the arresting agents, "What took you so long?" He was charged with 13 counts of espionage, 1 count of conspiracy to commit espionage, and 1 count of attempted espionage. In July 2001, he agreed to a plea deal confessing to all charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. In May 2002, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He received 15 consecutive life terms and was permanently discharged from the FBI. During his sentencing, Hansen delivered a brief and somber statement, stating that he was sorry for his behavior. He expressed remorse but provided little insight into his deeper motivations. Experts speculated that his betrayal stemmed not only from monetary needs but also from a desire to outsmart the institution that undervalued him. After sentencing, he was transferred to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado. There, he was held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, under strict security protocols. Over the years, he became a subject of media interest and public inquiry, inspiring books, documentaries, and the 2007 film Breach, which focused on the investigation that led to his capture. Hansen's double life included behaviors that emerged in court filings, but were not part of the espionage charges. These included voyeuristic acts such as secretly recording intimate encounters with his wife and sharing those recordings in private images with a friend. He also had a non-sexual but financially transactional relationship with a D.C. stripper named Priscilla Sue Gailey, whom he showered with gifts including a Mercedes-Benz, jewelry, and access to FBI training facilities. Gailey later stated that Hansen often spoke about religion and attempted to convert her to Catholicism. Over the years, Hansen's former colleagues and community members expressed disbelief and betrayal. A 2003 report from the Justice Department labeled his actions as the most damaging intelligence breach in FBI history. In response, the FBI implemented new security measures including enhanced financial disclosure requirements and internal oversight policies. Hansen served over 21 years of his life sentence before he was found unresponsive in his cell at ADX Florence on the 5th of June, 2023. Emergency medical services were unable to revive him, and he was pronounced dead at the age of 79. The Bureau of Prisons later stated that he likely died of natural causes. He was still serving his 15 consecutive life sentences at the time of his death, with no known efforts for appeal or commutation. Number 7. Charles McGonigal. Charles McGonigal, who was once the FBI's special agent in charge of counterintelligence in New York, was arrested on the 21st of January, 2023, at JFK Airport. He was 54 years old at the time of his arrest, though the alleged criminal acts date back to when he was still serving in the FBI at age 49. McGonigal held one of the Bureau's most sensitive positions involving high-level counterintelligence operations and was directly involved in investigations tied to Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. .5 elections. His charges stemmed from two separate but overlapping federal investigations, one in the Southern District of New York and another in Washington, D.C. The investigation began in part due to a tip from Allison Guerriero, a woman who had been in a personal relationship with McGonigal from 2016 to 2018. Guerriero reported suspicious behavior, including large sums of unexplained cash and improper use of FBI resources. She claimed that after learning McGonigal had no intention of leaving his wife, she became emotionally distressed, and during a drinking episode, she emailed his superior at the FBI. She disclosed both their relationship and McGonigal's alleged improper dealings with Albanian officials. Her tip helped federal investigators uncover a broader network of misconduct. One set of charges alleged that McGonigal, while still at the FBI, received $225,000 in cash bribes from a former Albanian intelligence officer. He allegedly took actions that benefited this individual, including setting up meetings with Albanian leadership and influencing FBI operations in ways that created a conflict of interest. Prosecutors also stated that McGonigal encouraged the FBI to open an investigation into a U.S. citizen lobbying against the Albanian Prime Minister without disclosing his own financial connections to Albania. Separately, federal prosecutors in New York charged McGonigal and Sergei Shestakov, a former Russian diplomat turned court interpreter, with conspiring to violate U.S. sanctions. After retiring in 2018, McGonigal allegedly began working for Oleg Deripaska, a Russian oligarch under U.S. sanctions, due to his ties to Vladimir Putin. According to court documents, McGonigal helped investigate a business rival of Deripaska and attempted to have the oligarch removed from the U.S. sanctions list. He did this while using coded language to conceal Deripaska's identity, referring to him as the big guy or the client. McGonigal was also accused of receiving wire payments funneled through a New Jersey-based company to conceal the source and purpose of the money. Prosecutors noted that these payments were made to a company owned by one of McGonigal's acquaintances, and the contracts used to authorize the funds included forged signatures. As the investigations unfolded, authorities noted additional misconduct. McGonigal allegedly helped secure a VIP internship with the NYPD for the daughter of Deripaska's agent, and used his position to facilitate meetings beneficial to foreign entities. He also failed to disclose foreign travel and contacts to the FBI, as required by internal protocols. During legal proceedings, McGonigal pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiring to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, conspiring to commit money laundering, and violating federal laws against doing business with sanctioned individuals. His co-defendant, Shestakov, also pleaded not guilty. Both were released on bond, McGonigal on a $500,000 personal recognizance bond. The prosecution argued that McGonigal betrayed his country by selling access and information to foreign interests, including individuals tied to Russian intelligence. They highlighted how his actions jeopardized national security and undermined public trust in law enforcement. They also pointed out his failure to disclose income and relationships that could pose conflicts of interest. The defense, meanwhile, did not deny the relationships but argued that McGonigal had no intent to harm U.S. interests. They claimed the payments were part of private consulting work conducted after his retirement, and that the failure to disclose certain contacts was procedural rather than criminal. They further emphasized that many of the activities in Albania occurred post-retirement and were not in violation of any active duty restrictions. In August 2023, McGonigal reached a plea agreement in the Washington, D.C. case, pleading guilty to one count of concealing material facts. He admitted to failing to report the $225,000 from the former Albanian official while he was still an FBI agent. He was sentenced in February 2024 to 28 months in federal prison. In the New York case involving Deripaska, McGonigal pleaded guilty in September 2023 to a single conspiracy count related to sanctions violations. In December 2023, he was sentenced to 50 months in prison to be served concurrently with his D.C. sentence. He reported to prison in early 2024. As of May 2025, Charles McGonigal has served approximately 16 months in federal custody. He is currently incarcerated in a medium-security federal facility. If he completes his full sentence, he will be eligible for release in late 2027, when he will be 59 years old. McGonigal's fall from grace has drawn national attention not only due to the nature of the crimes, but also because of the trust and authority he once held in the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency. His case remains one of the most high-profile examples of alleged corruption by a senior intelligence official in recent U.S. history. Number 8. Babak Broumand. From January 2015 through December 2018, Babak Broumand, who was then a special agent with the FBI assigned to the San Francisco field office, engaged in a bribery scheme in which he accepted over $150,000 in cash and gifts in exchange for providing confidential law enforcement information to an organized crime-linked lawyer in Los Angeles. Broumand, who joined the FBI in 1999, was 46 years old when the illegal activities began. For nearly 2 decades, he was tasked with high-level national security investigations, including recruiting and managing confidential informants. He held a position of considerable trust and had unrestricted access to classified databases used to monitor criminal and terrorist activity. According to federal prosecutors, Broumand used his official FBI access to perform unauthorized searches of sensitive databases on behalf of Edgar Sargsyan, a Beverly Hills attorney, later linked to Armenian organized crime. The information provided included whether specific individuals were under federal investigation, helping Sargsyan's criminal associates avoid law enforcement scrutiny. The relationship between the two men began after they were introduced at a cigar lounge in Beverly Hills. During their meetings, Sargsyan proposed a cash for information agreement. Broumand allegedly agreed to conduct searches on FBI databases in exchange for $10,000 per month, along with other benefits including luxury hotel stays, private jet flights, meals, and sessions with escorts. Sargsyan also purchased a Ducati motorcycle and accessories for Broumand, valued at over $30,000. Some of the funds were laundered through a lice removal business Broumand operated in Lafayette, California, known as Love Bugs. Broumand used the illegal payments to finance a down payment on a home in Lake Tahoe and to fund a lavish lifestyle despite being a full-time federal employee responsible for national security and counterterrorism operations. During the period in question, Broumand informed Sargsyan whether individuals such as Levon Termanzayan and Sam Sarkis-Salakyan were under active investigation. Termanzayan was later convicted in Utah for a $1 billion renewable fuel tax credit fraud scheme. Sulakian was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for a $250 million workers' compensation fraud in California. Federal investigators became suspicious of Broumand after his FBI parking placard was discovered by a Southern California police department during an unrelated stop involving Sargsyan. This led to internal scrutiny and a deeper investigation. A subsequent review of FBI access logs revealed unauthorized database searches. Investigators corroborated many of Sargsyan's claims despite concerns about the informant's own credibility. Metropolitan.rodent.faft at letterprotect.net. The investigation also uncovered that Broumand attempted to interfere in an ongoing FBI inquiry involving Felix Cisneros Jr., a Homeland Security special agent connected to the same criminal network. Cisneros was later convicted of corruption and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. On the 30th of August, 2022, following an 11-day trial in Los Angeles federal court, Babak Broumand was found guilty of conspiracy to commit bribery, 2 counts of bribery of a public official, and 1 count of engaging in monetary transactions in criminally derived property. Prosecutors argued that he had abandoned his oath to serve the American people in exchange for a lavish lifestyle. The government emphasized that his actions directly undermined the integrity of federal law enforcement operations and enabled organized crime figures to continue illegal activities undetected. During trial proceedings, the defense attempted to discredit the government's key witness, Edgar Sargsyan, highlighting his criminal past and suggesting he fabricated parts of his story. They also argued that Broumand had not personally profited in the way prosecutors claimed, and that there was insufficient evidence connecting the bribes to specific acts of obstruction. However, financial records, travel documents, and digital communications provided strong supporting evidence. Broumand was sentenced on the 30th of January, 2023, to 6 years in federal prison. At sentencing, the judge noted the severity of the betrayal and its impact on public trust in law enforcement institutions. As of May 2025, Babak Broumand has served 2 years and 4 months of his sentence. He is currently incarcerated in a federal correctional facility. If he completes his full sentence, he will be released in early 2029 at the age of 60. Number 9. Jeffrey Raymond. Jeffrey Raymond was 45 years old at the time of his first known criminal offense. He was a career officer with the federal agency. With over 2 decades of federal service, he held several positions in government, including overseas assignments in Mexico, Peru, and other undisclosed locations. Fluent in Spanish and Mandarin, Raymond was a well-traveled officer with a history of White House and congressional internships. He resided in U.S. Embassy-leased housing during his overseas postings, where some of his criminal conduct later came to light. On May 31, 2020, a passerby alerted police to an unclothed woman screaming for help on the balcony of an apartment leased by the U.S. government for Raymond. Local authorities in Mexico City responded to a report, and Raymond, who had been hosting the woman that evening, told responding officers that their interaction had been consensual. The woman, however, reported that she had no memory of events after consuming food and beverages provided by Raymond. She was examined and released from the hospital, while Raymond departed Mexico shortly afterward, as international travel slowed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The incident led the FBI and the Diplomatic Security Service to begin reviewing Raymond's conduct. An investigation was initiated jointly by the FBI and the U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Security Service. Over the following months, forensic analysis of Raymond's digital devices revealed more than 500 images and videos, many depicting unconscious, unclothed, or partially nude women. The content showed Raymond manipulating the bodies of incapacitated women, like opening their eyelids, touching them inappropriately, and documenting them without their knowledge. Between 2006 and 2020, Raymond had traveled extensively and engaged in similar behavior in multiple countries. Court documents revealed that he often met his victims on dating apps or through casual acquaintances. Some were platonic friends of many years. He would invite them to his residence, intoxicate them, and then photograph or record them in states of complete unconsciousness. At least 30 women were identified in the recordings. He was found to have searched online for combinations of sedatives. Raymond was arrested in La Mesa, California, on the 9th of October, 2020. He was charged with abuse, abusive sexual contact, coercion and enticement, and transporting obscene material. Initially, he entered a guilty plea in July 2021. However, in April 2022, Raymond filed a motion to withdraw that plea, citing erectile dysfunction allegedly caused by long-term use of the medication dutasteride. He claimed this condition made it physically impossible for him to commit the acts described in the charges. The motion was denied. In November 2023, Raymond formally pleaded guilty to 4 federal charges. He admitted to intoxication and abusing 4 women, engaging in non-consensual contact with 6 others, and creating obscene material of 28 women without their consent. During the sentencing hearing on the 18th of September, 2024, victims testified in person and through written statements. Many had been unaware of the abuse until they were contacted by federal investigators and shown evidence retrieved from Raymond's devices. One woman stated that her body looks like a corpse on his bed. Another said the images caused her to suffer panic attacks and recurring dissociative episodes. U.S. District Judge sentenced Raymond to 30 years in federal prison. In addition to the prison term, he was ordered to pay $10,000 to each of his 28 known victims, totaling $280,000. He was also sentenced to a lifetime of supervised release and will be required to register as an offender upon release. During the sentencing, the judge stated that he betrayed his government and your country. Raymond expressed remorse during the sentencing, and he was discharged from the federal agency and stripped of all security clearances. The agency later issued a statement condemning Raymond's behavior and affirming its support for law enforcement efforts. Following sentencing, Raymond was transferred to the United States Penitentiary, USP, in Tucson, Arizona. As of March 2025, Brian Jeffrey Raymond remains imprisoned at USP Tucson. He has served approximately 6 months of his 30-year sentence. He was 45 years old at the time of the offense and will be 75 years old upon completing the full sentence, barring early release or sentence reduction. Number 10. Harold Paul Rico. Harold Paul Rico, a former FBI special agent, was indicted in October 2003 for his alleged role in the 1981 murder of businessman Roger Wheeler in Oklahoma. Wheeler was the chairman of Telex Corporation and had uncovered financial irregularities at World Jai Alai, a Florida-based gambling company. Rico, who was 56 at the time of Wheeler's murder, was accused of enabling the murder by using his influence as an FBI agent to protect his informants within the Boston underworld, specifically members of the Winter Hill Gang. On May 27, 1981, Wheeler was shot in the head while sitting in his car outside a Tulsa country club. The murder was later linked to a skimming operation run by members of the Winter Hill Gang, including James Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Flemmy, both longtime informants of the FBI. At the time, Wheeler had been conducting an internal audit into missing funds at World Jai Alai, a company that had been infiltrated by the Winter Hill Gang, with assistance from FBI-protected informants. Rico was not present at the scene of the murder, but was later alleged to have facilitated the hit by tipping off the gang about Wheeler's investigation and authorizing protection for the killers in exchange for continued cooperation as informants. Federal and state investigations into FBI misconduct in the 1992nd and early 2002 revealed that Rico had been aware of violent crimes committed by his informants, but failed to act, often going so far as to suppress evidence or solicit false testimony to protect them. These practices came under renewed scrutiny following the wrongful convictions in the 1965 murder of Edward Teddy Deegan. In that case, Rico and other FBI agents were found to have allowed false testimony from informant Joseph the Animal Barboza to convict 4 innocent men: Peter Limone, Joseph Salvati, Louis Greco, and Henry Tamaleo. Barboza had falsely testified that the murder was ordered by members of the Patriarca crime family, even though the FBI had documentation implicating Vincent Flemmi, another informant, as the real killer. Salvati and Limon were eventually exonerated after serving decades in prison. Greco and Tamaleo died while still incarcerated. In 2001, after internal reviews, congressional hearings, and civil litigation, the U.S. government acknowledged its role in the wrongful convictions. On the 26th of July, 2007 U.S. District Judge awarded $101.7 million in damages to the 4 men or their families, citing FBI misconduct. Rico was later implicated in the Wheeler case, based on testimony from former gang members and new evidence that tied him to the decision-making process behind the murder. In October 2003, he was indicted in Oklahoma for conspiracy and aiding and abetting murder. Prosecutors argued that Rico had gone far beyond handling informants and had instead become complicit in organized crime activity. They stated that he knowingly allowed Bulger and Flemmi to continue operating criminal enterprises, including murder, in exchange for information that furthered FBI objectives against the mafia. Rico was arrested and held in state custody in Oklahoma. At the time of his indictment, he was 78 years old and in declining health. His defense argued that Rico's actions, while perhaps flawed by modern standards, had been in line with FBI policies of the time which prioritized dismantling the mafia. They claimed he had not authorized murder and was being used as a scapegoat for broader systemic failures. Before a trial could take place, Rico died in custody on the 16th of January, 2004. According to the Oklahoma State Medical Examiner, he died of internal bleeding and complications related to cardiovascular and kidney disease. He never faced trial for the murder of Roger Wheeler. Rico's legacy remains one of controversy, with legal experts, victims' families, and public officials citing his case as a clear example of institutional failure within federal law enforcement. Number 11. Robert G. Lustyik Jr. Robert G. Lustyik Jr. was a former FBI counterintelligence special agent and 24-year veteran of the Bureau who was convicted for his role in 2 overlapping bribery and obstruction schemes that occurred between late 2011 and 2012. The crimes took place while Lustyik was stationed in New York and involved attempts to interfere with a federal investigation based in Utah. At the time of the offenses, he was 52 years old. According to court records, he conspired with his longtime friend Johannes Thaler and a businessman named Michael Taylor to obstruct a federal grand jury investigation into a $54 million defense contracting scheme. Taylor, who was a former Green Beret, was under investigation for allegedly paying kickbacks to secure inflated government contracts in Afghanistan. In exchange for future business deals and a promised 6-figure salary, Lustyik used his FBI credentials to attempt to shut down the case. Beginning in October 2011, Lustyik began contacting Department of Justice officials and fellow agents to intervene on Taylor's behalf. He falsely claimed Taylor was a confidential FBI source, critical to national security, and fabricated internal memos to support this narrative. He also attempted to intimidate or discredit potential witnesses to derail the grand jury proceedings. Thaler acted as the intermediary between Lustyik and Taylor, facilitating communication and the flow of money. Email exchanges between the men revealed the personal motives behind the conspiracy. Lustyik wrote to Taylor stating, "Let's just get Utah over with and get stinking rich." In another email, he admitted, "The rate this is going, I will be indicted, way before you ever are." Thaler and Lustyik frequently discussed their financial expectations, and Taylor assured them that he would make more money for them than they can imagine provided they keep him out of jail. Simultaneously, Lustyik and Thaler were engaged in a second bribery scheme involving Rizva Ahmed, a Bangladeshi national living in the U.S. In December 2011, Thaler met Ahmed at a food court in Danbury, Connecticut, where he provided confidential FBI documents about a rival Bangladeshi politician in exchange for $1,000. The goal was to supply sensitive information stolen from FBI databases to a political faction in Bangladesh. The two parties later attempted to negotiate a $40,000 retainer and a $30,000 monthly payment, but when the deal faltered, Lustyik became enraged. Federal investigators uncovered the schemes through email records, witness interviews, and internal audits. The Department of Justice Inspector General led the investigation. Authorities found that Lustyik had improperly accessed classified systems and actively misrepresented facts to multiple government agencies. He was arrested in 2012, before any payment from Taylor's side materialized and before the Bangladesh arrangement could fully unfold. In September 2014, he pleaded guilty in the District of Utah to conspiracy to commit bribery, 8 counts of honest services wire fraud, obstruction of a grand jury investigation, and obstruction of an agency proceeding. In a separate case heard in the Southern District of New York, he also pleaded guilty to bribery and unauthorized disclosure of government information in the Bangladesh scheme. On the 30th of March, 2015, U.S. District Judge Tina Campbell sentenced Lustyik to 10 years in federal prison for the Utah case and ordered him to forfeit $70,000. In the New York case, he received an additional 5-year sentence to run concurrently. Thaler received a 13-month sentence in Utah and a 30-month sentence in New York to be served consecutively. Taylor was sentenced to 24 months. At his sentencing, Lustyik stated, "No man is above the law, and for 9 months I forgot that. I took a boyhood dream of wanting to become an FBI agent, and I destroyed it." Prosecutors responded that Lustyik had sold his badge and betrayed the oath of office he had sworn to uphold. He was discharged from the FBI following his indictment. In multiple messages prior to his arrest, he expressed bitterness about his FBI service, writing that after 24 years he had only a couple of boxes of awards in the basement, and describing the Bureau as a dysfunctional family. As of May 2025, Robert G. Lustyik Jr. has served over 10 years in federal prison. He was 52 at the time of the crimes and is now 66 years old. His projected release date remains undisclosed. Number 12. Terry James Albury. Terry James Albury was 39 years old when he knowingly removed and disclosed classified national defense information while serving as an FBI special agent assigned to the Minneapolis field office. His actions took place between 2016 and 2017, during which he systematically photographed dozens of government documents and transmitted them to a media organization for publication. The material primarily involved sensitive internal FBI protocols related to national security, informant handling, and surveillance practices. These disclosures led to his arrest and subsequent prosecution under the Espionage Act. Albury had joined the FBI with a strong desire to serve and protect the public. He was the son of an Ethiopian political refugee and was at the time of the incident and the only black field agent assigned to a counter-terrorism squad in Minnesota. His assignment placed him in direct contact with the Somali American community in the Twin Cities. Over time, he became increasingly disillusioned with what he perceived as discriminatory surveillance practices and systemic racial profiling embedded within the Bureau's operations. According to his attorneys, this moral conflict, particularly regarding racial and religious targeting, formed the foundation for his decision to leak classified information. In 2016, Albury began photographing internal FBI documents from his office. These included files outlining informant recruitment strategies and internal guidelines on how agents were to assess national security threats. A number of these documents were later published by The Intercept as part of its investigative series, The FBI's Secret Rules. One of the disclosed files, dated the 17th of August, 2011, corresponded with the 31st of January, 2017, article on the site. Albury was charged in April 2018 with 1 count of unauthorized disclosure of national defense information and 1 count of unauthorized retention of national defense information. He pleaded guilty to both charges. The case was prosecuted under the Espionage Act, a statute typically reserved for national security breaches involving state secrets. Although he was not accused of working with a foreign power, the Department of Justice maintained that his actions had endangered U.S. national security. The court proceedings took place in the U.S. District Court in St. Paul, Minnesota. During his sentencing hearing on the 18th of October, 2018, Albury appeared visibly emotional. He paused frequently while delivering his personal statement, at times wiping tears from his face. He expressed remorse, stating, "I truly wanted to make a difference, and never intended to put anyone in danger." He further acknowledged that he should have used the FBI's internal mechanisms to address his concerns, rather than resorting to leaks. U.S. District Judge Wilhelmina Wright, who presided over the case, responded to Albury's comments with measured criticism. She acknowledged the unique pressures faced by minorities within law enforcement agencies, but concluded that his actions had crossed a legal boundary. The judge stated that he knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew that he was putting the nation's security at risk. She described his decision as a fool's errand, and rejected the notion that his perceived ethical motives could justify the illegal disclosures. Prosecutors had requested a sentence of more than 4 years, citing the volume and sensitivity of the documents involved, over 70-inch total, with more than 50 marked as classified. They emphasized the importance of deterring future unauthorized disclosures, especially from individuals within the intelligence community who held high-level security clearances. The Justice Department also noted that Albury had not attempted to report his concerns through internal whistleblower channels prior to leaking the information. His defense team argued that Albury had acted as a whistleblower driven by conscience, not malice. They described him as a patriotic individual caught in a moral dilemma. 17 legal scholars submitted an amicus brief urging the court to consider the public value of Albury's disclosures and the role of the First Amendment in democratic oversight of government conduct. Despite the plea for leniency, Judge Wright sentenced Albury to 48 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was allowed to self-report to prison at a later date and was not taken into custody immediately following sentencing. Upon conviction, Albury was formally discharged from the FBI and was transferred to a federal prison to serve his time. He began serving his sentence in 2019. His case remains a notable example in the ongoing national debate surrounding whistleblowers and media leaks in public service. Thank you guys for watching. Do you think federal agents deserve to spend years in prison for any crime? Leave a comment below.